Yo,
Welcome back to another episode of Footy and Coffee Conversations. Got my coffee right here. You have your coffee, sir.
of
What do
course,
you
sir.
What'd you order today?
I panic ordered. I got an oat milk honey latte.
Okay.
It was a straight panic order.
I'll be honest with you, that was not my favorite drink to make or to have.
It's not my favorite either, I'll be honest, but it's all
It's a
right.
little
It'll
too
have to
dry
do.
for me.
I agree. Yeah, it's almost giving me cotton mouth, and I feel weird about it.
Yeah,
I
we'll
don't like it.
see. We'll see how the interview goes with that.
Oh no.
Just
Oh
to
no.
start, if you want to introduce yourself, your name, what position you are, what club you're playing for.
Yeah, so I'm Michael Kozielek. I'd say currently I'm playing 6 or 8 most of the time, and I'm a player under the GAFA for Sporting Christina.
Shout out Sporting Christina.
For the
Maybe
boys.
maybe a little bit of bench player. We don't know. We'll have to see.
It's a new season, you know. Got to come in and perform.
All right. So just to get going, we'll have you discuss kind of your youth career growing up, how you decided what university to go. When did professional soccer become kind of a realistic goal or something that objective you were looking for?
Yeah, cool. So as far as youth soccer, when I was younger, did the whole in-house thing, you know, when you're really young. I think I started playing at like 3. I was pretty much bribed by my dad to just score a lot of goals with Pokemon cards. That's what he'd buy me. So that's how I got started. And then from there, it became a bit more serious as you're getting older, you know. I played around just multiple Chicagoland clubs, Euro soccer, you know, a bunch of those, Bartlett Hawks, all the good stuff. And then when I was 15, I went, that's when the academy system kind of just started. And that's when I tried out for the Chicago Fire Academy. Ended up making that, which was like a big opportunity, big step for me as far as I think the seriousness of my career. I was really serious about soccer, and, you know, I trained hard and stuff like that. But I think as far as professional aspirations, that's when it kind of really took a hold of me around 14, 15, that I was like, I really want to do this and I might have a crack at it. So went to the Fire. It was kind of like the next logical step. Went to them. Ended up making the academy. Honestly, didn't play a lot of academy games when I first started at academy. I played mostly DA games, so like right under. So pretty much your bench squad for your academy. And I was just still super fortunate that it was a remarkably high level. You know, you're playing with guys like at 16 years old, like that are homegrowns already, Victor Pineda, stuff like that, you know,
Yeah.
Kellen Gully, like big names. So to get to learn under kids that are that good at that current moment, you know, it's an awesome opportunity. And that,
And real quick, just for people that don't know, the Chicago soccer scene is one of the more serious scenes in the U.S., I'd say. So you
for
obviously,
sure.
you know, in another even MLS academy could easily have been starting those, but I mean that just has so many talented players that have come through the Chicago ropes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, all academies, I mean, soccer's even is, think of that. They've got to be the most famous private academy that I can think of. I mean, they're a
Yeah,
huge club.
yeah, they have so many successful players. Real quick before you keep going, we're getting a lot of questions about the safari hat that you're wearing. We have a question. Honest wants to know how much for a safari tour. What's the story behind that hat?
Honestly, this is just a good old, I don't even know where I got this from, to be completely honest with you. It's it looks like an Adidas hat. I don't know. Safari tours, though, I'm going to say a going rate of $50 for everything, the works, you know, drive you around and everything. But yeah, when you're Polish, you got to transition into the sun very carefully. I'm not built for the sun, so I gotta ease my way in.
All right, are you guys on Groupon? Is there a discount, like 2 safaris for
Yeah,
35 or something?
yeah. Look at Koz's Classic Safaris. That's what it's under. You'll be all good.
All right, so keep going with your career. You're playing at the academy.
Yeah, so I was getting, you know, a handful of games like with the academy teams and then playing with the DA as well. Just growth at that time for me was really tenfold as far as my speed of play and just being around kids that were playing at such a high, rate of speed. I was athletic. I was athletic when I was younger, and that's what carried me through a lot of soccer, but I wasn't necessarily like, you know, a maestro in the middle by any means, like at that point in my life. Like I was the last place any coach probably would have played me is in the middle of the park. They kept me out wide, let me run, whipping balls. So I got to develop a lot more of my game at the academy, and they forced you into becoming a complete player, So that was definitely big for me. That went well for, what was that, a few years of high school, and then you do the PDL system here while in college. So I started going to college at DePaul here in Chicago. I had committed my senior year, whatever it was, junior year, senior year of high school. Went to DePaul my freshman year. Was super fortunate that I met a good group of guys there. We had a crazy talented class, which unfortunately didn't show on the score sheet that year. I mean, we struggled. We had a really, really tough year in the Big East, and that's when the Big East was massive. Split divisions.
Right.
so I mean, you had some crazy good teams in there. We struggled, but through that struggle, the good thing, I guess, from a personal note is I started every game as a freshman and was given a lot of play time and, a different type of learning from academy where you're kind of learning a lot of mentally breaking down the game and stuff, and you get kind of thrown into college ball, and it's so much athleticism, a lot of teams where there's not a whole lot of structure as far as their style of play. It's just straight athleticism. So it made me grow again, forceful change, kind of, makes you a different type of player, a more advanced player. So I definitely had to beef up a little bit.
What do you think of playing in that stadium? We just had a guest earlier this week talking about the DePaul Stadium and the train tracks right there.
Biggest advantage in the Big East was having that field. I'm talking because then going from when I played at Butler and played against DePaul at that field, hated playing on that field. Tiny, it's packed, super fast turf. The L's running right next to it. I mean, it's hectic. It's hectic there.
It's a good representation of Chicago, right?
100%, 100%.
So you have a lot of success your freshman year, and then what decisions going forward do you make?
So freshman year, it went well. We were losing a few guys. Tony Aguilar was our star forward. He was a senior graduating. We had a few other guys transferring, real big names. Ray DeLeon, who you know very well, ended up going to VCU.
Shout out, Ray.
Yeah, big Ray. David Salvaggi, he left to go to Marquette. So I was just it was a tough time for me. It's never good when you're on a sinking ship kind of per se. At the time, it's you're you see a lot of other good players around you making moves. And that summer at PDL, we had a really good summer with that U20 Cup or U19 McGuire Cup. Made it to the finals, and I was talking to my coach before that, Larry Sunderland, and I was I'm really looking to be serious about this, and you and I both know, I just don't think here's the right spot for me at the moment. I needed a little bit more structure. I was comfortable in Chicago. I kind of wanted to get out of Chicago a little bit, challenge myself in that regard, and as much as I liked playing, I wanted to be challenged day in and day out, knowing that playtime would never be guaranteed for me,
Mm-hmm.
So my coach ended up being good friends with Coach Snape at Butler, put in the good word, and we got the ball rolling. So that's when I made the transfer.
So looking back now, are there, because I think a lot of the common theme between players is kind of we didn't exactly know what we were doing, deciding on what school to go to, how to make that decision. Are there questions that maybe you would have asked the DePaul club or looked into to maybe have, not gone there originally? Or do you think that the route going there and then transferring benefited you?
It's hard to say. You always look back and say, I could have done it differently. It was funny. Before that, I was really talking with Georgetown was my other big team I was talking with at the time. Yeah, big Hoya Nation. So, they ended up signing a local kid who they didn't think was even going to go to college. I thought he was just going to go straight pro. Ended up going there. I kind of lost out on my spot. So I was just kind of the road you face, wrong time. So I was really committed on going there. I was stoked to go to Georgetown. I was I really want to push for going here and get that finalized. And then it didn't really work out. So I wouldn't say I would have changed it differently because at the end of the day, I was kind of an underdog when I was younger as far as, I was athletic and sure I was playing for good clubs and stuff, but there were so many better players around me, especially at the Fire.
Yeah.
I was one of like the like borderlines where like coaches told me early on, they're like, you'll be lucky to play D1 soccer. And I was like, damn. So that was my motivation driving force of doing it. And I still knew that DePaul was Big East. I'd be under a good microscope. So I was like,
Right.
when I got the chance, I still felt like it was a great chance for me personally. Yeah, it seemed right. You know how it goes. Sometimes, you have a lot of good pieces and stuff, and it just unfortunately doesn't mesh or certain things change. So we just as easily could have had a great year in the Big East. It's just
Yeah.
how it
Yeah.
goes.
100%.
So I'd
Um,
say, yeah, it benefited me transferring for
yeah.
sure the way I did.
100%. So then you go with Butler, and Butler at that time had just a load of studs in that program. You guys had a stacked team.
We had a squad, that is for sure. I mean, I could shout out the people that would actually know, like a lot of MLS guys from the few grades above me. I mean, we had guys playing all throughout USL Championship, and we had really, really good guys. Just good personalities, easy locker room, and just happened to be super talented.
So talking through that process, you go from being a freshman, starting all the games, getting a lot of minutes, to now new
So,
team, a better team probably, talent
mhm,
wise, and you having
yeah.
to kind of fight and earn those minutes again.
Yeah, so I think probably only my parents know this. So when I got to Butler, Butler had just joined the Big East that year. And because of that, they wouldn't grandfather in me being like a out of conference transfer. So my first year at Butler, I couldn't even play a single game. So I was just there to train, go to school, and I got on the team, but I wasn't eligible until the next year. So that mentally, I don't think I really thought through at first. It was more just like transfer, new school, everything's flying, it'll be easy. And I got there, and you're busting your ass in preseason, two a days, Indiana. It's like 100 degrees on the turf. And I was really good in preseason, and I was still pumped because it was that new adrenaline rush. And then as you start getting into the first few weeks of season, your your paradigm shifts completely because you're like, I can't even play. So your first instinct is like, you can have that feel sorry for yourself pity party, or you can push through it and know that there is this goal in the future. Like you still are fighting for something. It's just hard when it's not a short term goal.
Yeah.
So yeah, I grew up a lot is honestly what it was. I had to grow up and know that, like, hey, me being a contributing member for this team is not going to be in games this year, but it's going to be, can we give our starters the best practices we can, really? And I would say that was one of our best years, honestly, when I was at Butler, and I couldn't even play in it. But we had a really, really good depth on the team, and it forced the starters to be, at their absolute best. So it was cool to kind of see still how you can contribute to a team even when you're not in the starting 11 for an entire year.
Oh, I think that's a major difference in clubs that are or teams that are successful is the
Mm-hmm.
players that aren't playing and how hard they work in training to force those starters to keep their spots because I've seen teams where you don't have that push from behind and the starters know they're going to start and they get lazy and complacent
Right,
where the team is
right, 100%.
so then
100%.
you start next year uh, after you're finally eligible to play. What happens then?
Yeah, so that was my junior year, technically, or redshirt sophomore year, whatever. But yeah, so first year in, was fortunately the fittest I think I had ever been in my life. Playing under Snape, he was just an absolute fitness freak, and showed in our team and how we played. We played a super high press. Played left back at the time, primarily, and we had a rough year, to be honest, as far as Butler standards were. Again, a remarkably talented squad. It's a few really, really bad injuries that year. That was the year Steinberger had broke his face, pretty much. A lot of stuff we were overcoming, and again, it's kind of, you're constantly throwing these challenges. I can't think of a year I haven't been thrown a challenge. It's just they usually are different or they look a little the same, and you got to face it. It's really what it comes down to. We had a choice. I remember Coach sat us down. He's like, we had maybe two bad losses early on, whatever it was. And he's like, you guys can either, sit there and mope about it, and then we'll let this turn into 4 or 5 bad losses, or, try to bust your ass, win out, and see if we can still get a crack at the tournament, because you know
Yeah.
how easy it is to fall out of tournament rankings. It's pretty quick. So, yeah, it really forced a lot of guys to step up, and I think that's when I kind of learned what like real leadership was. When things aren't going well, it's really hard to be a leader. Anybody can be a good captain when you're winning. A locker room's easy to entertain, but when you're losing, how do you answer? And I think Fricky was a big answer to that, and Zach that year. Even when Zach couldn't play, super motivational guy. And for anybody that knows Brandon Fricky, well, you fall in line when you hear Brandon Fricky yell at you.
Uh-huh.
So, so
Yeah.
he kept the
Yeah.
boys in line for sure.
Yeah. No, he's a good leader.
Yeah, yeah.
So then,
Um,
so you have success at Butler. Um, Professional soccer then is looking like your objective at that point.
Definitely. That was the year too when they kind of started talking to you as a junior. What are your real goals? Are you going to try and push to be a professional player? Do you just want to ride out, getting your degree, going into the work world? What are you going to do? So I definitely had made it clear with my coaches and my staff. I wanted to play professional soccer, wherever that landed me in their eyes, because I know, I still had a lot of developing to do as a left back, even at the time where I probably wasn't realistically MLS ready. As much as you wish you are and say you are, I had a lot to still
Yeah.
speed up on and learn. So I was aiming more for like USL Championship. I thought at the time, hopefully graduate, get into some preseason stuff like that. Um, Ended up weird, wonky stuff kind of happened. Day of draft day, stuff like that. Who really knows what all happened? Weird blurred lines. But anyways, it pretty much left me as like an ineligible transfer, leaving Butler, because I had a fifth year available and stuff like that, and you have to file obviously your paperwork. So it kind of put me behind the eight ball a little bit with the whole draft process. Not that I was necessarily going to get drafted, but the process and then USL stuff. So I was training at Bridges that whole time, staying fit. My coach had told me about Brett and everybody up there. So in the meanwhile, I was just staying fit training there. And that's when Brett was like, you know what, no matter what happens here, come on the trip with us in the summer. Let's go, to Sweden and stuff like that, Denmark, and let's see if you can have a crack at it. He's like, I think you're a good player and I think you got a shot. So trained with him for the entire summer, before that trip leading up to it, good 4 months, and landed in Sweden.
Yeah, before we talk about Sweden and the Bridges trip, I think every group's kind of unique and has their own interesting stories or something. Do you have any memory or something that sticks out particularly from your group?
From Bridges?
Yeah.
um, yeah, I'm sure. Got a handful, but we'll keep it short. One of my favorite things I think that happened on our Bridges trip was we land in Denmark, I believe, or wherever we landed. I think it was
Yeah.
in Copenhagen,
Denmark.
wherever we were. And we land, and I don't know how we didn't think through any of this beforehand, but obviously the vans that we got to rent to drive to Kuye um, were manual. They weren't automatic vans. I think we had one person in the entire group who could drive stick at the time out of like the 20 something 30 people that are on this trip close to. And I remember little Brett Hall just being so mad. He was just like, you know what? Nah. He's like, okay, just throw your cards, just throw your bags in the car. And he gets up and jumps in this front seat and has to prop it like all the way up so he's looking over the steering wheel, little guy. And
Wow.
he angrily drove our van as I got to navigate for him. So that was quite the experience.
Yeah, I remember we were in preseason in college in Northern Ireland, and
Mm-hmm.
we had the same situation with vans being manual, but then to really make it, it's the on the other side, the clutch and all. So
Yeah,
you're like
yeah.
you're trying to drive stick shift with your left arm, and I remember I was in our bus one time with our assistant coach at the time, Nate Miller, and he stalled out like 3 times in a row, and we're all like, giving him a hard time. And at one
Yeah.
point, he turns around and says, "Unless you want extra fitness from this car, shut up until I get there."
Sounds about right.
So it's a struggle. So you go to Sweden, you play some friendlies against teams. You obviously get picked up by a team. What's that
Yeah.
experience? First
Yeah.
professional contract.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll be hypercritical of myself or just honest with myself. It wasn't a smooth road for me. I was I had a few games that were very average. Few games I was lucky I played really well in against like Halmstad big clubs. And at that time, you have to walk that fine line as a younger player still is you have to have confidence in yourself, is which I firmly believe. I mean, you have to be very, very confident in yourself, rate yourself highly. Like, if you don't rate yourself highly, I don't know what's your objective for playing. It's hard to, what are you going to play if you don't want to rate yourself and really put in the work to rate yourself? So at that point, like I was super confident in how I was playing as a player, and I felt much more complete as a player. So I was just like, I really want, a big contract. I just played against a massive club, played super well. Why aren't I getting a big contract? And then you very quickly realize the reality of the world is you're still a nobody. You don't have, what is your resume? What does college mean to, like, these professional clubs and stuff like that? It really doesn't mean a ton,
Yeah.
Um, so I had a real quick reality check of like, wow, this is what I thought I deserved. And then, I get this Division 3 contract in Sweden, and everyone's just looking at you like, yep, that's what you get, and you're going to take it. And you're like, well, all right, I guess so. So, again, that was a big growing moment for me where it's like I could pout and, just stop playing and be that guy that's always telling people, oh, I deserved this and I played good in a few games. But I was like, I'm going to put in the work, and if this is my starting point, this is my starting point. So, again, was fortunate. I ended up loving it. I lived in like a tiny, tiny village in the mountains in Sweden. We were kind of like an anomaly of a club, how we were even as high ranked as we were at that time. And we were fortunate enough my rookie year that we got promoted. So that was a super cool experience I got to learn like early on and be a part of, that I wouldn't trade for anything. I mean, that was still to this day, one of the coolest things, being promoted in a tiny, small town like that and seeing the impact it has on like those fans in the town.
We were was interviewing Palumbo earlier this week, and he was talking about his
Mm-hmm.
first year, how they got relegated. So a big, very different first year experiences as a team.
Definitely both polar opposites of the emotional scale.
So then, what's your thinking? What's your process? You had a good, first half of season professionally. You get promoted. What are you thinking going forward?
Right. So then, obviously you're flying, you're cooking with confidence at that point. So I really just knew that my goal, I was never somebody, I'd be lying if I said I was someone that wrote down a lot of goals or like had it on paper. I really don't. I just always knew, and I've always kind of had it in me where it's like, I don't have a problem knowing I want to be really good at what I'm doing. And I don't feel the need to hide that from people. You know what I'm saying? So I was flying at this point. I felt really confident, and I was just like, I want to keep climbing the ladder. I was fortunate enough that my club had been promoted, so I was comfortable going back for another year. Um, and I knew that there'd be new challenges and stuff. Once you're in Division 2 in Sweden, for people who don't know, I mean, you're at the highest, semi-professional amateur level before it becomes fully professional. So the level, like I knew I'd be challenged at that level. There's really good foreign players in that level, all fighting to get into, the top 3 tiers. So I knew that was the next challenge for me, and busted out another off season at Bridges, really putting in the work and trying to develop as a more complete player. And I was very fortunate as well that some of the guys we had on our team in Sweden were older players towards the end of their careers, but that had super successful careers in, Europa League games and stuff like that. So I was also trying to pick a lot of their brain, while I was playing with them, and what can I take from that and modify for my own game,
I think
develop
I
as a
think
player.
Division 2 Sweden's really interesting with that because you get young players that are trying to work their way up the ladder, and then you
Mm-hmm.
get a lot of old players kind of on the downhill that have so
Without
much
a
knowledge to share with those younger players if they take advantage of it.
I mean, without a doubt, I laugh sometimes at like how fortunate I was at that club at Nordvarmland. I mean, I was playing with 3 guys at that point that had played Europa and Champions League games for Red Stars and in Ukraine, and and it's just to think back that I
Unreal.
was that lucky, yeah, that I got to become not only players with these guys but form friendships with them, and I still got to learn from them for a few years. It's like beyond me. It's so cool,
So
no
then,
doubt.
what you have a good off season? What you decide to do? How does that season go?
Yeah, so off season went well. It was pretty standard. I was coming back from my first sports hernia, unfortunately, that I played that whole first year in Sweden with. Um, so I was really getting healthy for that. I'll be honest, I got too beefy. I really did. I couldn't run for a few months, and I was just doing physical therapy, and I was lifting a ton. So I put on like 30 pounds. I felt great, like I was big
Oh
and
wow.
strong. And then Yeah, and then by the time I was like training again and got back on the field and was allowed to like touch the ball, I was like, oh my God, like I felt like a brick, like I couldn't move. So it was kind of a whole new, the first time I had ever battled having to like really, really cut weight for playing again. But luckily it came pretty quick at Bridges, running a ton.
You do enough sprints, it'll go.
Yeah, yeah, get Brett mad enough a few times and you're back fit. So yeah, so I went back to my club in Sweden for year two. Um, we did well at the beginning, actually, had a fairly good start. Came to the mid-season break, I think maybe in like fifth place, right around there, sixth place, with the second half of the season to push. Had a few trials that I was trying to line up with Division One teams at the time, and then fell into the classic visa issues, you would say.
Mm-hmm.
Had to head back home pretty much a week into that summer break. Came back, and that was a real tough one for me because I felt great. I was flying, and to have my season just all of a sudden cut from you because of visa issues, you're kind of back to square one. You're like, okay, that went great and it was awesome, but now I can't finish out there. What's the next move?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So yeah, so I was, talking to a lot of guys that had kind of been through it. What they're picking their brains. Abador, who we've had on here. Been a huge help for me throughout my career since meeting him. As far as just, he's a very realistic guy to talk to. And I think that's what a lot of kids need when they're in that situation. Because you can feed yourself a lot of lies to tell you, it's this isn't that bad or I shouldn't worry and stuff like that. When realistically, stuff happens quick, windows close quick. You have to be, on your toes with really trying to find out what you could do next, where you belong, and being realistic about it. So
Yeah,
Abador
100%.
helped me navigate. Yeah, so Abador helped me navigate that a ton. And by the time I had gotten back home, I went on a few trials here for stuff coming up in the States, but the windows don't really lap, the same way. So it's tough. So it was, again, a lot of training on my own and just being responsible for your own development when it's not ideal. So luckily, Bridges has been there through and through for me for that for the last handful of years. So then God, what happened? That seems like such a long window. That window I remember between those, like looking back on it now, I have like PTSD from that summer. Yeah, so came back. I remember trying to stay fit for that long, and I was like, it was mentally wearing on me towards the end. And the next season came, and at this point, I was like, this is it for me. Like realistically, as a player, I have to make something happen. If I get trapped into the whole visa thing, playing half year by half year, I'm really not going to develop, and no one will take my CV seriously. So that next upcoming season, me and Abador, I think he might have mentioned it.
Yeah, he mentioned.
He he had some like tentative trials set up and stuff like that. I was just reaching out, pretty much cold calling clubs in that my division from before, divisions above. I went to Linköping City, and I literally lived in an apartment with another American player that we knew, Kyle Konotek at the time. Had set us up through the club to stay in an apartment. Trained there for a few weeks. Abador had already moved on a few days after to another trial, so then I was just at Linköping for like a week and a half. The definition of the grind. We lived in and out of a hostel for a few weeks. we were doing it all. We were training with a kid who had started like one of the first big private training companies in Sweden. He was a few years older than me at the time only, but he had like keys to like old hangars and closed warehouses with turf that you've never seen. It's so old, and that's like what we were doing: training, staying fit, and doing these trials.
The grind, man.
The epitome of the grind. So we were really all over the place. Nothing was certain. All I really known was talking to Dave. I was like, I'm 20, what at this point, 23 maybe. I was like, I have to make something happen. I don't sign a contract this year, and I don't, I'm done. That's what it was. And super fortunately, as I was sitting there, I had a buddy hit me up, and he's like, "Hey, like I see you're on trial and stuff like that. Like, how's it going?" And I was like, the visa thing's gonna be tough to get over here again. I'm playing well and I'm fit, but we'll see. And he was in Australia at the time. And he's like, "Well, here, my coach is interested. I showed him your stuff. Give him a call, message him on Facebook, and let's see what happens." And 3 days later, I was signed and flying to Brisbane, Australia. So it was a really wild preseason that year.
It seems to be so many guys' stories of like they have an idea of where they're going for a year, and 3 days later they're on a plane to
Yeah,
some other country.
yeah. Yeah, that was nuts. I remember I landed in Australia and my legs were so fat. I was in a plane for so long, it looked like I was pregnant. I had to like for that day I trained that night and I remember I had to sit in my room that whole like next 8 hours and I just kept my legs above my head because I was just like my legs were so heavy and they were so bloated. I was like, what is going on? I had never seen this before.
So how did Australia go? What was that experience like? What was different from Sweden maybe to Australia?
Yeah, Australia was great. I was fortunate again that I found myself in a really cool club. I played for Albany Creek Excelsior for the first half of the season in Brisbane. We, at that time, I think we're undefeated going into the halfway point of the season. So everything was flying. It was super good. I was, kind of hungry as ever at that point and like really hitting stride and feeling good about myself as a player. So I was always chasing what's my next move? What's my next move? Looking back on it, wish I would have enjoyed some of the moments a bit more. But I was just hungry. It was just super, super ambitious, and that's when I was on the move in Australia and went on trial with a few big clubs down there, Marconi Stallions and stuff, and ran into some similar issues. I played really good at Marconi out of Sydney. They were interested in signing me, and unfortunately couldn't clear visa space. They had a visa player that they were almost positive they were going to sell, and then the team that was buying him dropped it. They didn't want to buy the kid anymore. Couldn't clear another room for visa for me. Um, so I ended up going down to Melbourne and played with David Caban for a while at his club. Yeah. So because Melbourne was like the scene in Australia as far as like how they kind of rank their regions. Your best football is played in Melbourne. Sydney was a close second, and then it kind of worked its way northern and western Australia, historically at least. There's good
Right,
teams everywhere.
right.
Um, so I just wanted to be under, the best microscope I could. Went down to Melbourne. We had a super good ending to that season. We tied a ton, but we didn't lose a game. I think we lost one game the whole second half of the season in Melbourne. So I had good stats and loads of game film from that year. Was playing kind of a little all over, a little center back, left back, in the six. But I was super confident in my game film. I was like, I got a lot to show at least, and was kind of trying to walk that tightrope as I was getting to an older player of like, you're ambitious but you're getting more savvy on where you really belong in the rankings
Mhm.
and stuff. You're not like, all right, I'm gonna go play Champions League now.
An
It's just
honest
not gonna happen.
assessment.
Yeah, yeah, and that's I think if we're all going to be honest as athletes, I think that's maybe one of the hardest things to mature into being able to do. It took me forever to learn to be able to do that. I know for a fact when I was younger, it was like very very very
Unrealistic.
unrealistic. That's the word. Very unrealistic with some of the things I just thought I deserved for
I think it's
looking back on it.
I think it's a challenge because you have to have this like self belief that can't be shaken, that like
Right.
you're the best, but you also have to be honest of where your level is. And I think oftentimes as a younger player, you either take one or the other. So your self belief goes
Hmm.
down because you believe that your worth is how your honest assessment is,
Yeah.
or you have unrealistic expectations linked to your self belief. So
Right. I'd say definitely. I mean, when I was younger, my ego was humongous. And then, as you keep achieving things, that's great, but you got to keep the ego in check, which definitely happened to me again when I got older and started playing with really, really accomplished players. And they kind of chisel away at it for you without even being rude. It's just like you start to just put things in perspective. You're like, oh, wow, like really, where am I? How much more can I achieve? So
mhm.
you start to become more realistic. But yeah, I was pumped, I was buzzing. I was like, let's get this rolling for I thought for sure I'd land, a fairly big contract in Australia. I was hoping at that point. Um, and it was hectic though. I can't remember what was going on at that time. I had a few like end of season trials that had like fallen through and then they were taking their time. They're like, "Oh, well, they're kind of laid back in Australia about the trialing process, which was really weird. Everybody wants you to trial there. You don't almost hear of anybody signing without trialing at any level, which is really strange to me. It's
Yeah,
I get it to a degree. Certain things are going to call for a trial, but I'm talking like sometimes it's like guys that played in the same division. They've seen them play or played against them multiple times. They're like, all right, come trial. It's like I kind of think you know him as a player now, but so they were like waiting, very hesitant on all these trials. Like, how long are you going to be in the country? And I'm like, well, I'm really not going to sit around here forever. I
yeah,
was so hungry. I was like, where's my next contract? I want to sign this. So I went back to the States for the off season. Got back to work with everything as far as like trying to find teams stateside. I went on a handful of trials that off season, up in Lansing, didn't work out. And I was just like, you know what? I was like, I had become very sour to U.S. soccer. If I'm just going to be completely honest, I just the whole process to me was just rough. I didn't find much success in it, which probably contributed to why I was just so indifferent. I was like, yeah, if we're going to be honest. 'Cause I was just like, you know what? For me, it's just not in the cards, and I was open to going back overseas. I knew I had known teams in Sweden. I figured that's where most of my connections were. So I set out again with my old club in Sweden. I was like, you know what? I can at least play here for half season, get games, and then try and sort the next thing out.
Mm-hmm.
Preseason was a bit of a circus, some internal issues, stuff like that. And so when I got a hold of you, look at that. Then our paths crossed. That's how we got here. So yeah, I don't know if you want to tell people or if I want to tell people, whatever, but how that all went down. But yeah, essentially, you got into your position newly and everything, which was awesome. Super cool position to be in, and I was just fortunate enough that our paths crossed at the same time, and I was super open to the idea of playing under a coach that like genuinely cares about your placement and stuff. I knew who you were as a person, and knew that would carry into your coaching philosophy, I'm sure.
Yeah, that was it worked out well because we were looking for a midfielder at the time, and your club had some issues, and you were looking for a move, so it worked out perfectly, and it saved you from having to do the from Sweden to Australia flight or something. It's a little easier to get from Sweden to Finland.
Save me another around the world flight.
Yeah, so then you played in Finland for Sporting last year. You had a lot of success, I think. Made a name for yourself in the league, in the area around all of us. You had some bangers of some goals from farther out. What are you thinking after the success of 1 year there? What's your thought process going forward at that point?
Yeah, I mean, so last season was remarkable in a lot of ways. I mean, just meeting a new group of guys, always a new country, change of pace is always super cool. So I was fortunate for the opportunity. We learned pretty early on that we had a group that could definitely overachieve. I think for what, maybe the preseason idea was for us or what we could achieve. I think we had some solid pieces, and we were really lucky that we, added a few more solid pieces as the season went on, with Yuri in the back line, Omar, great guys, Benny, So achieving what we did, came in fourth, correct? Fourth, right there. Yeah.
Fifth.
So I mean, yeah, ending where we did last season, I was super stoked with knowing, going into another off season, you at the helm, you, Yari, and everybody, finding our next players, the last few pieces to the puzzle. I had faith in the vision, and I know that the club was ambitious to go up, so it made it easy for me as a player to get behind that. I would love to be a driving force to help the club achieve its success, ultimate success that it can, and it's just a bonus that I happen to get to play under, a coach that is a friend of mine from before, and with, a great town and people that, really treat you like family. I mean, I've never had as much support from a community, I don't think, as playing for Sporting. And that's not being like, haha, I play for Sporting now, just bias. Like, genuinely, I've never had a community as invested in my well-being and how I'm doing and the countless dinners we've been invited to and stuff like that. I mean, it's a super unique experience for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a major factor in continuing for me, at least personally, to want to come back and be involved with this club. I was thinking before the interview today, and I was just like, I wonder if like it would have been interesting to go back to like the first time we had met at Bridges all those years ago. And if we had known like, I would end up being your coach or whatever, just like how weird that would have been.
Yeah, it is. It's such a strange dynamic. And I think that's probably one of the questions I get asked the most from like other people that are, more soccer players, but even like friends of mine. They're like, is it like weird walking a fine line? Like you knew your coach. He's not that much older than you. You knew him as a player. And I was like, to be honest, if there's a handful of people you could do it for, because we know just as easily the people you could never play under that are your friends. You know what I'm saying? Like, I definitely have great buddies that are great players, but I would never play under. I just know I wouldn't. And I think that just goes to speak for your reputation. I don't think there's a lot of people that couldn't play under you. You make it easy as far as, very personable, but holding people accountable. We can have a relationship and that's great, but at the end of the day, I know when you're serious and when things need to be done and down to business. So it's that good balance, the healthy
Yeah.
balance.
And I think it takes both. It takes two to tango with it. You have to have
Mhm.
a player that can understand when it's business and when it's fun as well.
Right. Right. Yeah.
All right. So we've talked some about your career. First and foremost biggest question, got it from your former roommate. Shout out Benny.
Oh no,
He
dude.
said, since you're in the U.S. right now, until the quarantine ends and you can come back over, how much are you missing Tallis? And if you want to tell kind of just a brief overview of what Tallis is to people outside of, Christina.
All right. The first part of that question, I miss Tallis about 0%. And the more important part of this is Tallis, for people who don't know, is like a one-stop shop in our town. It's a little bit of everything, the best way I can put it. There's sports stuff in the basement, biking, fishing gear, hardware stuff. I don't know. It's like a Menards, it's that with like a sporting element to it. Coffee shop, whatever's in there now. Now this is the thing. That's a great thing to have in your town. It's not great going into it every single week when the merchandise doesn't change every single week. The merchandise is the same for months sometimes. So Gaffa and Benny loved dragging me in there, and this is what they'd say. They didn't say, "Oh, let's just go blow off some time." They go, "Let's go check out what's new in Tallis," every single week, knowing there's nothing new in Tallis. So my only way I could combat that was with the plunger video. So if anybody hasn't seen that on my Instagram yet, I'll make sure I post it later today.
Give the people a little shock video.
The only way I could fight back.
All right. So you mentioned Bridges. You mentioned that you trained there a lot of the off seasons, went on the summer trip. Something we've been asking the Bridges players to do is pick their ultimate five-a-side team with no MLS guys, and you can put yourself on the bench.
Cool.
Well.
Yeah, I definitely would be on the bench to sub myself in for free kicks. That'd be it. Anyways, and also I'm salty about some of these five-a-side teams. Yeah, I get it. We got a lot of good guys and stuff like there, but dang, no friends in there. I've seen some of these five-a-side teams. I'm saying
it's a good thing that everyone's not meeting back up for Bridges next week, because there'd be a lot of awkward conversations.
Oh, there'd be an earful. I'd be giving it to some people. Anyways, I think my five-a-side. I knew this question would come too, so I was
also
thinking.
Wait, before you tell it, shout out. Yanni Smed said, "I worked at Tallis 15 years ago. They have the same gear they do now."
Spoken like a true reporter. This just in. Got him. Oh my god.
All right, sorry. Go on.
You said it, not me, Schmetters. You said it. Yeah. So my ultimate five-a-side team, I'd have to go Abador in the back. For those who haven't been crunched by Abador in a tackle, you really aren't living. You aren't living life. Abador has smoked me a few times in tackles, and it makes me very hesitant every single time. So I put Abador in the back for sure. I put Jeff Gall in goal. It's a no-brainer. I mean, he's Polish. We stick together. Sick keeper. He's got nasty feet.
Yeah, incredible hands.
Incredible hands. Yeah, really the ultimate keeper.
Great hair. Beautiful.
Yeah,
smile.
Great hair. Great hair. Yeah. So I put those two. As far as who else I put in the back line, I'd maybe take converted Honest from forward to center back. Throw him back there.
Okay.
Because that's a calm back line.
That's
you got Abador and Honest. That's a calm back line back there. But they can both deliver a tackle. So I'd chuck both of them back there. In the midfield, I will stick with my boy, because Bulldogs stick together. I'm going to throw Lenny in the midfield, because I've said this for my whole life when people ask me about Lenny, or I explain Lenny as a player. Guy you want on your team every single time. Every single time. Last guy you want to play against. I hate playing against Lenny. I will tell him right now, Lenny, I hope you're here. I hate playing against you, still to this day. I hate playing against him in Bridges. So yeah, I'd throw Lenny in my midfield for sure. He's earned it. for a little flair, a little cheeky flair in the mid, I think I'd throw X in there. I like X. Or I'd throw Gerald Ben.
Okay.
It's what I'm looking for,
Just
If I'm
that
looking for
little
that,
extra.
if I'm looking for that pure pace, Gerald, I got to. If I'm looking for the razzle dazzle, I got to put X in there.
Dude, real quick with Gerald. I remember one day, it was like his first week of training at Bridges.
Oh no.
I look over, the man is wearing soft grounds on that turf at Soccer City. Soft
Yep,
grounds.
the vapor soft
Oh
grounds.
my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yep,
said,
that
I'm
was
so
him.
glad you're on my team and not against me.
You can't trust the dude who wears medals in there. First of all, you cannot trust that. But yeah, I definitely would have to throw him in there. I think he's just unmatchable pace. Realistically, he's just nasty,
Mm-hmm.
and he's in Finland. You got to give him a shout. Up top, this is a tough one for me. This is like where I'm most torn because we've had some good forwards come through there in the day. I think though, with like on FIFA when you're matching your chemistry on your team,
Uh-huh.
you got to keep the chemistry good. I think I've got enough like older dynamic players on there where they're kind of on the same wavelength. I got to use an older forward, so I got to put Woj up there. Got
Solid.
it. Silky pillow chest. I mean, what more can you ask for? The guy's got a banger of a left foot.
Yeah.
Easy. So I think that's my five-a-side team.
That's a solid team right there, I would have to say.
I think he put up a fight.
We got a shout out from Sarah saying we're her two favorites, so
Oh, sweet. We made the
represent.
list.
All right, so what if you could go back to 15-year-old you, what advice would you give yourself, soccer specific?
I would definitely say look at things more long term. Don't be short sighted. One of the hardest things to do compared to say. I think it's an easy thing to say, but while you're in the mix, things are going 100 miles an hour, and you think every single decision is your last, realistically. Which led me to make some, hasty decisions in my career 100%. If I could go back on certain decisions, I definitely would navigate them a lot calmer with more, time in the approach. But, it happens, and you have to make do with the decisions you make. But I definitely say 15-year-old me, trust the process, trust the work you're putting in, and know that something will come to fruition through it. But relax, kind of enjoy some moments. Don't have to be so hasty, for sure.
All right, that seems to be a common theme of enjoying the moment. I think it goes
Yeah.
fast, but again, yes, you're trying to push high, you're trying to push on, but you still have to enjoy the process and where you're at.
Oh, without a doubt.
For obviously you're in quarantine, you're not here in Finland, you're stuck in Chicago. Has it been difficult for you to stay fit, stay ready when there's kind of uncertainty of when the season will start? What are you doing to stay prepared?
Yeah, I think you're lying if you're saying it's just as easy to stay fit. It's like nothing's changed. Sure, tons changed. I think you've had guys on here that have said, this is separation season in a lot of ways. If you don't think you've been challenged in your career, this is the ultimate challenge. I think it's the perfect test to see where you stand. I definitely would say it's harder to stay fit while being home and not having, a good group of guys that I'm on the field with, growing with during a season, pushing me, It's a lot more of, holding yourself accountability to like the max right now. Fortunately, I have still ways to train, and I'm fortunate I have facilities available to me that are empty, So still doing it is great, and having a program to follow is great. But no, I would definitely say mentally it's a challenge to stay fit. You really got to key in. You got to push yourself.
Yeah. No, I think, it's the first time in everyone's career where they're training without a immediate goal of what's next, kind of
Right.
when that
Right.
goal starts. So it definitely is a grind. And I agree with that, calling it the separation season.
Big time.
Another question, kind of random, is what is your order when you go to the grill?
Oh man. Yeah, my order is the same almost every single time. I get the is it the Kevin burger? Is that what we used to get?
Yeah.
Kevin burger? Oh man, Kevin burger every single time. Side of those fries.
I just got the Kevin burger this weekend, but I switched out for the chicken in it. But
See, I heard you and Benny do that last year, and I didn't know how I felt about it, but I definitely will have to try it next time.
you gotta give it a try. Shout out Timothy cooking in the grill.
Big Tim in the grill.
Looking forward in your career, what still are you hoping to achieve? Kind of what are your goals? What do you want out of your career?
Yeah, so I tell a lot of young players your success a lot of times in your career you have to pick and choose, what you're going to view as a success. My goal still that I push for every day is to play top flight footy. I want to play the highest level footy I can wherever I'm playing, and that's always the goal, whether the country, wherever you're at. The goal is to climb the ladder, play at the highest level you can. I think that's important. That's what I'd say has always been my goal, and I continue to keep as my goal. Um, but also, I've had told players, it's like, I think also I can live a happy career knowing, if I put it all in and say I don't make it to where that pinnacle I think I should or whatever, if my goal now or my thing I can attribute now to helping clubs with is helping these clubs get promoted, being a part of multiple promotions, here, Australia, wherever, Finland. If I can be a part of multiple promotions though, at the same time, like if that's the due I pay, then I can live a happy career knowing that I was able to help at that level. And that's what I got to take away from it.
Creating that legacy right there.
I'm trying, man, trying.
Um, to our younger listeners that are trying to decide on colleges, I think that's such an overwhelming decision at times for younger. There's so many universities, there's so many different factors. What's your maybe your top couple things that you believe should be the most important when deciding where to go to university?
Yeah, I think you have to know what you're getting into as a whole, especially in the modern day of football, being realistic. University is still a great route for a lot of players. It offers a lot of, benefits, a college degree, having a backup for a future is definitely important, and you can't say it's not. So I'd say if you know that that's what you want out of it, and you know that you're going to sacrifice maybe potentially a little bit of your trajectory as a route, going college route now, sometimes, as the modern day football goes, they're saying it's too late by the time you're out of college. If we're going to call a spade, for some people, sure, maybe it is. For some people, not really the case. It really depends. It's case by case.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think you just have to know going into it, is it a place you can grow not only as a player, but as a person? Because essentially you're spending 4 years there.
Yeah.
You'd like to think, looking back on it, that it's, if you're driven about soccer, that should be a priority. I agree. Maybe more so than, some of your elective classes and stuff like that. I understand that. But also make sure it's a place where, as a person, you can grow and develop. Because 4 years is a long time to waste, being short-sighted with one goal when you have, 5 things you could gain from the whole opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Then we had one request to kind of, first of all, just say like what nicknames do people call you? What do you call yourself? All of that we want to hear.
In Finland? Everywhere?
Just in general.
Well, my last name is Kozielek, obviously, so everyone calls me Koz. I haven't gone by my first name probably since I've been like 10. So Koz is probably the most common nickname. Gustav was the newest development of last year in Finland. He'll be back, growing out the flow to be true Gustav again. Now there's some unsavory ones. Maybe not my favorite nicknames I've been called in Finland also. Musty Mike being one of them, which is totally unjustifiable. I'm not even going to expose who gave me that nickname sitting at lunch. Guy. What else have I been called?
I don't know who that was, but that's it seems like a nickname that someone would only say if it fits the bill,
Whatever. I'm done. I'm done here.
Go a little bit into the Gustav story, because I think all of a sudden we were all used to Koz, and then on social media, all of a sudden, boom, this guy with a headband, mustache. No one knew what was happening.
Yeah, so I in the middle of the season, just had one of those mid-season epiphanies, I guess, where I knew that a change was needed. I shaved the massive beard I had. I had grown out bleached hair. I was like, what can we do next? Cut it down to a mustache, gave myself a middle part, and said, "This feels right. This feels like I'm a proper striker from Stockholm, made his way over here." And that's when I gave myself Gustav, and I really let it ride.
Did you feel like you became more your true self when that happened?
I do. I think I can attribute my greatest goals of last season to just that inner power I gave myself, embodying Gustav.
I mean, it worked on the field, so I couldn't be mad, but it was something else.
He just didn't have unwavering support. We'll put it that way.
All right, man. Well, thanks for being on. I'll link your Instagram and all. If players have any younger players
Cool.
have questions for you, anything.
100%.
Hopefully, get out of this quarantine soon so we can see Gustav back on the field with those long range sniper goals, holding down the
We're,
midfield.
we're praying. We're praying.
If you're bored, go to Koz's Instagram. He's going to be leading a safari in his backyard. Just Venmo him $50 and you can join.
It's cheap, man. That's a deal.
All right, thanks,
All
man.
right,
Appreciate
Gaffa.
it.
See
All
you,
right,
Gaffa.
bye.